Hello, welcome to this video tutorial on how to essentially texture a model and get it into the TDK. So as you can see, we've got a gas bottle. If we check the UVs on that gas bottle on channel 1, the reason why I use channel 1 is that it's just as easy just to export the model into an FBX and load it into Substance Painter for the painting of the mask, which I've already done. So there is the mask. Okay, so you notice the UVs are all unwrapped, no overlapping. So first thing we need to do is look at the files that we've generated. So essentially, you have a folder called the model name. You have a max file called the model name, and you also have your mask file called the model name underscore mask. So let's set up a material. We'll go into the material editor. And as we're just going to be using one material on this, we'll just use not a multi-sub object version of the mask, of the material, sorry. So if we go into add a composite to the diffuse channel, so we go here, general, composite. Okay, we have 3 channels. Layer 1 is for your material. Layer 2 is for your decal, which is different to the material. That's essentially a kind of a texture with an alpha on it. Generally, you would have like a decal of rust, moss, something like that. And you've got layer 3, which is for your mask itself. So what I tend to do is just drag and drop the mask into every run, save you creating a file node. So we'll go in here. So the first layer is your, as I explained, the material. That is always on UV channel 2. So we will go in, we'll go into the Cola project, TSO, the build folder, then into dev. And as you can see here, we've got the decals and fabrics folders. Essentially, these are generated when the TDK, when you add a material into the TDK, essentially. So this is the paths at the moment until TDK 1.8 are very, very important. So we'll go into our fabrics and we'll just scroll down, just look for an appropriate material, some sort of steel. It doesn't have to be perfect for this demonstration. So we'll go with steel painted Orbix. Okay. And we'll click OK. We'll just use this little button to go forward to go up to the next layer. This is UV channel 3. And this one here would be in the decals folder. And for this purpose, I'm going to apply a decal of rust. Then we go up again to the last layer, and this would be UV layer 4. Okay. I tend to go back to the first material and just turn that on. Then we'll apply the material to here, all the way to the top. Okay, next what we need to do is set up our UVs, essentially. So I will add a UVW modifier. I will then change the channel to 2 and say move. Now what that's essentially done, if I collapse it and then just click here to go to channel 2 and then the editor, this has copied the UVs from channel 1 to channel 2. So a note on the UVs. Channel 1 essentially is from the 0 to 1. Okay, can't go above, outside of those bounds, simply because Substance Painter doesn't like it. Any transitions or parts of the mesh that are bridging between channels is not allowed. Channel 2 can be scaled, can be any size you want and any place you want. Channel 3 can be scaled again to any size you want. Channel 4 must be from the 0 to 1 space again. Now the way to check that on Macs is if you go into your UV editor and press this little button up here. Essentially what that will do is if I move this out into another square, you'll see it automatically highlights the square. So straight away I can see that that is going into the next square essentially. Okay, right, so this material here, so if we look here at the model, press F2. Sorry. Okay, this is our material here. Now if we leave it like that, it's essentially, we've got no indication of how that will look. On this paint itself, there may be some cracked areas, there may be something else that is generated by the normal map. So in this instance, let's just scale this up to say about there. We can check it later and adjust accordingly. So now we'll collapse that. So the next thing we do is add a UV modifier to channel 1 again, and then we'll copy that to channel 3. Click move, we'll collapse, we'll go into channel 3, and what we'll do, we'll just scale this up because this is our dirt. So the bigger this, the bigger this is, the bigger scale, the more defined the dirt will be on the model. But there's a trade-off, because if you go too big, you will see, depending on your dirt coverage, you will see a repeated dirt texture. Same with all the textures. If you go too big, you will start to see a repeat within the textures. Okay, we'll collapse that, and then we'll go back to channel 1. We'll add number 1, and we'll say copy this to channel 4, click move, and that's all we have to do essentially. So within the TDK, all models always should point to the Y, so the front of the model to the Y axis. Now in this case it doesn't really matter because it's exactly the same on all sides. So what we need to do now is, as we've got our model, all right, we need to create a dummy. So if we go over here to a dummy, and generally I will create the dummy slightly bigger than the model, very slightly bigger. Doesn't particularly matter a lot, but it counts as your handle when you're within the TDK. So if you have an absolutely massive dummy, then that could be an issue. So what we'll do now is we see our pivot there is at 0. So the pivot is important for the model. Okay, so we're just going to snap this to there using the pivot. Okay, now this is very, very important. The name of the dummy must be the same as the max file. So essentially, we have gas underscore bottle underscore 01. So this dummy would be called gas bottle underscore 01% LOD 0. Now for the model names and stuff, ED don't really look at anything past the percent unless it's, you know, something specific, which we're not going to get into today. But just make sure that the file name of the dummy is exactly the same as the file name, the max file. Okay. So what we'll do now, we'll parent the actual geo to the dummy. So that's essentially done. So what I would normally do now is I would select everything. I will then copy that over, ready to generate LOD2. So if we just change this to LOD2. Now it depends on, sometimes when you select a box, it may give you the model name to change. In that instance, just click OK and then go and manually change the dummy name. So for LOD2, you're probably looking at about, depending on the model and what you're trying to achieve, a 50% to 60% reduction in polygons. So what we'll do here, we'll just go in and we'll try and tidy up some of these edges to remove detail. And we can see how that looks. So we'll just remove those edges. So we'll just click there, double click there. Wrapper Tools is a really good plugin because you have something called dot loop. So if I right click that and then I say dot ring, it will choose every second line. And then all I do is just remove them. Okay, so I can see now there's not really a transition between here and here, so I could probably get rid of that line as well. Okay, but be aware of the silhouette. The silhouette shouldn't really change that much because you will notice it. For further away LODs, it doesn't really matter that much, but they will be checked by ED. Okay, so LOD textures. So we've discussed LOD 0 and the way essentially the V-Ray House 5.1 material is applied, which is what we've created here. For LOD textures, there is only an MR map and a diffuse map. There is no other maps. Okay, so we'll quickly set up that. So what I tend to do, I'll come to the mask, copy, paste, paste. I will remove the word mask, and then I will just type LOD1, select it, copy it, click that, F2, Control V, and then just add dot MR after it. And I will do pretty much the same thing for LOD 2 and 3. Okay, sorry, LOD 2. So we copy that again, paste it again. We'll come in here, we'll copy that. We'll change this to LOD 2. We'll just copy that and dot MR. Okay, so we'll just pop them over there. We'll start a new texture. For this one here, I'm just going to name LOD 0. Start a new material, call this LOD 1. We'll go into the diffuse map, the maps, and all we'll do now is drag over LOD 1 texture, put it in the diffuse, and the LOD1.mr and put it into the specular level. Then we'll go into it and change those to UV channel 2. So all LODs are always UV channel 2. Okay. So we have to do some editing here. So we'll just validate that by us removing that detail hasn't caused a problem. And it looks like, see, we've got an overlap there. Now the UVs for LOD 1 and LOD 2 do not have to be the same as LOD 0. They can be anything you want simply because the TDK is going to generate the LODs from LOD 0 for LOD 1 and LOD 2. Okay, so let's just quickly fix. Well, we'll just pack it again, just for this demonstration. Okay, so we've just packed it, and then we will collapse. Then I'll add, and then I'll copy that to number 2. Collapse it. We'll go here. We'll assign that material. What I like to do as well is to see the material in the editor or the desktop display. So same thing again for LOD 2. We'll remove that over there. Change this to LOD 2. We can duplicate this material by just dragging and dropping it into the next slot. Changing that to LOD 2. Now, if I dragged a file into this place here, it would reset the UV channels. So the best thing to do is to go into each material, grab your LOD 2, drop it there, use this button to go to the next one, grab your MR, bang it in there, go back to there, turn off the visibility and then put it back on. Then when we come over here, then we'll just assign that texture. Now you can check what materials actually applied by just right clicking on the model, go to properties, and you'll see material name is LOD 2 for that one. Material name is LOD 1 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 for that one. Material name is LO material LOD 1. So we're good to go on that. Now, that's essentially it for the materials and the textures that are required. The only other two things that we're missing are the collision shell. So if we drag another copy across, and I tend to call this just col for collision shell. Now collision shells do not have any materials on them. So we'll go into the spanner, UVW remove, and click materials. I like to give mine a nice little color so I'm aware. This could quite easily be reduced further. So we could go in here and just remove some more lines because, you know, we can. Let's have a look. And we'll remove that one there and that one there. Yep, I think that'll do for the collision shell. Okay. Now you see the different shading there as I'm moving around. So that's telling me that by me editing stuff, I've changed the normal directions on some of the faces. So if we just click that and go into added modifier called edit normals, then Control A to select them, then break, and then reset, and then go into collapse all, and then go into the polygon or number 4 on your keyboard. Control A to select all the polys. As you've seen, they're all selected, and just auto smooth them. I've already done this before, but okay, next thing we need to do is create the proxy. So essentially the proxy is just a flat plane of a top-down view of the shape of your model. So if we copy that over there and just call this PRX for proxy. Again, the proxy does not have any materials on it. So I'll go in here, press 4, we'll delete that. Yeah, okay. We'll go into there, we'll scale all these flat, and go into the line, grab that, remove that, select all the faces, click flip. We will then reset the pivot, so it's the center of this object, and stick this object at its 0 in the z-axis, or z if you're from England. So essentially that's pretty much our model done. So what we need to do now is we need to assign some properties. So if you've got the TDK, you can go into ED Terrain plugin, and under the config, you just make sure you're pointing to the correct Cola file. So the Cola file for us is essentially, so I go in here, so this is the structure. It would be build, Cola, and it's the terrain.cfg. That's what you load in here. Okay, once you've clicked this plugin, if it's the first time you're running the plugin within Max, you will see this bar appear, but there probably won't be any icons. So just shut down Max, restart Max, and the next time you click it, these icons will have been generated. So as you can see down here, we've got set model properties. So what we want to do now is click that. And this is where you can set your distances, your quality, and various other options. So first thing we'll do, on the first dummy, we'll just say that's a collision shell. Now there is a bug at the moment where if I come down here, you see that's a V-Ray House 5.1 as a residue from a previous model. So I'll just clear that out because a collision shell mesh has no settings at all on it. Okay. Now if I click here, you see it's automatically set this as a collision shell, which is not true. That's a bug within the TDK and should be fixed in 1.8. So if we just turn that off, okay, and this is where we set our distances. So a good indicator. Now this is not something that should be used for every single model. It's model specific for distances. So these are just some figures I like to use initially. Okay, So what's this? The near distance is 0, the near blend is 0. Okay, so that means no matter how close you are to the model, it will always show you the model essentially. This far blend, this is saying the maximum amount this model will be seen at for LOD 0, remember we're on LOD 0, is 400 meters. So this is in meters. Okay, so now we'll go down to the gas bottle LOD 0 model. This should be set to V-Ray House 5.1, which if you look down your list, it should be there. The semantic is building, no proxy bias. The flare type is building, and we want to use normal map for a LOD 0 item, so you can see the normals within the texture. Okay, now we move on to the LODs. Now you see I've made a mistake, right? I've called gas bottle 01 LOD 2, gas bottle 01 LOD 2. So we've got two LOD 2s essentially. So we can quite easily just rectify that. Just clicking close on that, going back to the dummy here and calling that LOD 1. Okay, now we click the properties again. We've got LOD 1. Now rule of thumb, the first for LOD 1, the first two, near distance and near blend, should always kind of be 100 lower than the maximum value of LOD 0. So LOD 0 was 400, 400, so it's kind of 400. So on here, what I would do is do 300, 400, and then for this model, you wouldn't need, normally I would put 1,000 in here, but I'm just going to put 600 in here. 0, 0 for the shadows, and we'll do 100, no, let's do 300, no, 200, 200. Okay, we'll reduce this down to say 512. We'll go on to the model itself. This needs to be not V-Ray House 5.1, it needs to be V-Ray House LOD 5.1. The semantic is still building, the flare type is still building, the proxy bias needs to be 1 because this is LOD 1, and we turn off the use normal map because at greater than 400 meters, you're just wasting video memory displaying a normal map on something you will never ever see. Then we move to LOD 2. So we'll just check our distances, 600. Okay, go to LOD 2. So we'll do 500, 600. And for the distance, so this is the max distance, I would say 1200 to maybe 1300. And we'll do 150, 200, 300, 400, and we'll turn that down to say a 128 texture. Okay, again, because this is LOD 2, V-Ray House LOD 5.1, semantic the same as building, proxy bias would be 2 in this instance. It's obviously a building still, and turn off use normal. Now you can use this blend factor. So generally you would use blend factor scale XYZ. So as you move further away from the model, it scales down in all axes. So it looks like it's getting smaller in the distance. So in this case, we will do that. Then we'll go and set our proxy. We'll click on the proxy dummy here, and we'll just say proxy. And again, proxies do not have any settings whatsoever on the mesh itself. So we'll just turn off all those and turn that off. And essentially that's done. So if we save that now, which is updating the gas underscore bottle underscore 01 in the same name of the folder. And if we select it all, we can click this button here for export SUP4. So this is the SUP4 viewer. So if it goes to the first window, then closes and then opens another window, you know you're kind of good. it's at that first window where it's doing its error checking and stuff. If your view is white, like this, for a little bit of time, depending on the speed of your computer, that's where it's building the caches and stuff and the shaders and loading things in. So if we look down here now, um, as you can see, we've got no floor. So if you press left alt F3 and then just change this to say desert, or if you want it grass, or if you want it snow, or none. Tend to use grass. Okay, so we'll use left control and W. So it's WASD, WASD for left, right, up, down, using the mouse with a click, left click to pan, or not to pan around, to orientate. Okay, so you can see there we have a nice little bit of distribution of a gas bottle rust on there, which we can see the normal. Okay, so while we're in this display, what I will also do is for each model, essentially, you need a preview file, which is essentially just a thumbnail, which will load up one now. So the best thing is just to copy another one. So the preview file should be named model name dot preview, and this file is actually a BMP file. So I've just copied one that I had for a flag. All right, so this will appear in the TDK editor and also the TDK itself. So what we'll do, we'll just grab a picture of the gas bottle. We'll go in here, Control V to paste, Control T to resize, and we'll just put that there. Then Control E to merge the layers, Control S to save, and we're done with that. So as you can see now, we have a nice preview file, we have a model, and we have the temporary LOD1, the temporary LOD2, and the mask. Okay. Now we could get this in the TDK at the moment, no problem at all, and that would go in no problem at all. But what I'm going to show you is how to palletize this material, or a similar material, depending on if this is actually a palletized material. So I'll just pause the video there, and I will just validate if this material is palletized, and then we will continue. Hello. Right, don't seem to be able to pause the video, but we'll just continue anyway. Okay. So, for the palette, there are two musts. Okay. The mask itself, if we open the mask in Photoshop, so the mask channels are as follows. The red channel is the ambient occlusion. The green channel is your dirt distribution. So remember we talked about the material itself. So for LOD 0, if we go into the composite material, we have UV channel 2, UV channel 3, UV channel 4. So we've got material, the diffuse material, the decal, which is essentially the rust, which is what that channel is referring to. So wherever it's white or varying degrees of grey, then the most or all of that will be seen through and give it a nice look. Now, I can't stress enough how important the masks are. Don't just load something into Painter and just apply a couple of masks, because some of the masks you're going to have to hand paint. Gives that really nice effect, a really nice look. because some of the masks aren't particularly they're a great starter, but then they're no replacement for good old texture work. Okay, so if we go back to Photoshop itself, the blue channel of the mask is designed to um, show or allow the model to show light if it's on material. So for example, if I had a window in a building, and the window had an SI map texture. So essentially you would have, your diffuse, your MR, and your normal, and an SI texture, which would essentially be light emitting from a window. If that texture has an SI map, all this does, this blue channel, is allow that light to come through on the model. By painting white on the blue channel does not illuminate anything. This is not the light source. The light source comes from the actual material itself. Okay, so in order to palletize an object, we will need to specify which faces can be palletized. So in this instance, I want the full bottle to be able to palletize the full bottle. Okay, so what we can do is just reuse our UV wand again. We'll go to the editor. We'll go to Tools, Render UVW Template, click Render, and then we'll save that as a PNG file. So if we go gas bottle, and we'll just say UV underscore P. Okay, save it as a PNG, click Save, there we go. If we go back to our Photoshop, and we then drag our mask in, not mask, sorry, our new file. So if we drag and drop that there, while you can see the full desktop picture, it will just cover it. Press enter, use the wand tool, click somewhere that there's nothing, and you'll see it'll select the stuff that like the stuff that's not actually within the map itself. Press left control left shift I to invert. Now we have a base for our selection of the UVs that we want to palletize. So then we'll click on the mask. We'll go and assign an alpha. We'll fill with white, and then Control D to deselect. Then we'll Control I to invert. So essentially, any part of a mask that you want to be palletized would be black. Any part of the mask that you do not want to be palletized would be white. Okay. So if we just save that there. Now the reason why it's popped up another box is because I've still got this layer on. You don't need that layer anymore, so we can just save that. Okay. So one thing we need to do is just have a look at the palette file itself. So if I just drag that into Photoshop, so we've got a fabric palette. Now this will obviously come down with the TDK, or within, if you've got access to the Google Drive, we can show you. Within the Google Drive, there is the structure that you've downloaded to place on your H drive, which is your USB key. So if you look in here, I keep fabrics, so they should not be there for some reason. Let's put them back for some reason. But yeah, so fabric 1.2 is the latest version. So you would download this and choose your respective palettes from there, which is essentially this file. So what is a palette? So a palette allows a single model to be placed in multiple locations, varying the colors on a specific line. So what does that mean? Okay, so this gas bottle, if for instance I'm saying, okay, well, I know these gas bottles are red, okay, but to stop people noticing the copy and paste of the same model, I could apply a palette to this and assign, say, this line here, which has many different shades of red. So what that would mean is every instance within the placed model would have a different color. So it doesn't look like it's copy and paste. So essentially, you could get away with using, say, a warehouse. Um, warehouses could have blue roofs, red roofs, yellow roofs, pink roofs, grey roofs. It does, the colors are endless essentially. Um, but each thing would be in its own line essentially. So as you can see, there are quite a few lines here up to line 32 or 31 essentially. Now, do not change any line above from 0 because the file starts at 0. Then you've got 0, 1, 2, so forth, down to 31. Do not change anything above this black line because this would affect ED's actual models that are in the sim, or anything they provide. So all our materials, or all our pallets, I should say, are below this line. So if I wanted to palletize this now, I would have a look through this file and say, there's not really any colors there that match what I'm looking for. So if you ping me or Norfolk and send us the RGB values of the colors that you want in a line, then we will add them to a line within the fabric and then tell you which line to apply. So let's say, for instance, in this instance, we want this line here. So our model wants to be green, pink, or purple, whatever colors they are, blue, red, gray. Okay, so we'll just zoom in here just to see what that line is. So that's line 31. Okay, so we don't need that palette file anymore. And we don't need the mask anymore because we've already assigned the palette the palette alpha, which is going to allow that. So we don't need that either. So all we have to do to palletize this is go into the object properties again, and on LOD 0, the mesh, click use palette, enable palette V, and then put the line in 31. Now that's essentially how you palletize LOD 0, right? Now there are some requirements for LOD 1 and LOD 2 now. So each model within the TDK, if you're palletizing something, needs to be slightly bigger. So LOD 1 needs to be slightly bigger than LOD 0, LOD 2 needs to be slightly bigger than LOD 1, and the collision shell doesn't matter. That can stay the same size as LOD 0. So the way I do it is I just select that model and I use a push modifier within 3D Studio Max, and I'll assign a really low value, say 004. Bit too much. So we'll do that again and we'll try 001. Okay, that'll do. Then we'll collapse that, and in here on this one, I will do the push modifier at 002. So for the LODs, a couple of other things we need to do is that if we go back into the set model properties, if we go into the actual meshes for LOD 1, the only thing we have to tick here is use palette. You do not specify a line number. I do the same for LOD 2, click use palette, and then I close that. Now if we look at this again, if this material is palletized, I haven't checked that yet, and we go into the SUP4 viewer, Right, so it doesn't look like that material's palletized. Because what you should see now is that this model should be changing color. So in that case, let's just go and choose a different material that I know is palletized. And I'll make sure that material that I've just chosen is actually going to be palletized as well. But you need to bear with us because we've got a lot of other stuff on at the same time. So let's choose a steel material. I think ED have one. So some of these materials are Orbix. Obviously it says Orbix on it. Some of them are provided by ED themselves. Right, so fabrics. Where is it? There is one like a rusty material, a rusty steel. I can never find it. There it is. Okay, metal rusty. Now you've got to ignore the way this is going to look because, as you can see, what I was referring to before by the scaling on channel 2, that you can see straight away there's a pattern to the rust within that's built into that material. So we will just go into the sub 4 viewer again. Just select all of those, press frame them up. Just go across here and you'll see it will change color. That was pink, there's the blue. So essentially what it does, it goes from the left, so each square, each pixel, or a square part of the line, it can be its own color. If you've got 3 squares, then obviously the chances are that, if you distribute it to 33%, 3 colors, then 33% of your placed models are going to be that color. But you don't really have a control over any specific model color. So if I put this outside a house and I wanted that to be specifically blue, and I was using a palette where one of the colors was blue, I would have no control of which color that would choose. So what I would do in that instance is I would request, if there was no blue available on a specific line, is request a line to be added to the fabric palette, and provide myself or Norfolk the RGB values of that palette. Okay, so now we've palletized our model. All right, we have essentially nothing else to do in here. What we need to do now, so as you can see, just let me get the file up here. So as you can see, we've got nothing else in here now. Okay. Now you see the mask has gone a bit weird, and that's because we have an alpha on it in the viewer. So we just move that over there, and what we can do is just select everything, and this button here generates the OFSH file into the same location as the max file. So we'll do that and click yes, and as you can see, it's just generated this OFSH file. So what we can do now is get this into the TDK, right? So if we just minimize that and we go into our models and say, for instance, you need to pick a library essentially, or create a library, depending on the structure of how you organize your models. We go in Orbix details, right click, add a model. So then we'll just copy that into there. We'll choose gas bottle 01, and you can see straight away it's picked up the preview file, which is there. Now what I need to do is add the other files. So if I add LOD1, LOD2, and the mask, nothing else gets added. If there were SI maps in there, you would add the SI maps, which is a good thing. Okay, then I basically build the library themselves, checking that there's no red errors going to be generated. So any red lines or anything, they need to be addressed. So as you can see, that was perfect. So What you can also do is for the max distances on LOD 2, if you're not sure about how far you can actually see a model within the game, what you can do is after your first build, if you go to the gas bottle, for instance, this one, gas bottle 01, this one here, right click it and say dump model. And what this will do, it'll look at the model and tell you some statistics about it. But if you look right at the top, on the max distance, you've got 182. So that's 182 meters essentially. So I think our values were a bit excessive. So in my instance, I would probably set these for this small item. I would probably set them to like 200, 300, and then adjust all of the LOD 1 and LOD 0 values accordingly. But for this example, I'll just leave things how they are. So after the first build, we then come up and now it's time for the TDK to take over and generate this, and this file. Because remember, these are just placeholders. These could be anything. They could be blank files, could be anything you want. So if we just right click on that and just say render LOD textures, you see it does some calculation. If you get the dots, that's great. If you get plus signs, that's not so good. So you see it's just generated the files. And one thing you can notice is the palette V file. If it's got a black and white image in there, you know that the palette's working really good, and it's been picked up and identified. So once you've generated your LODs, as you can see, we chose for LOD 1, remember 512, and LOD 2, 128. So it's generated the files respectively compared to what we actually chose within the options of the set object properties. So what we'll do now is, because we've just generated the LODs, we need to reread and build the library again. As you can see there, it says changed files for. So it's added more files, which is great. So it's updated all its libraries. And essentially that's it. That's how to get a model into the TDK. If we want to go to the scene editor now, I can show you quite an easy way to just to place it. So if we got, we'll just pick anywhere, doesn't matter. Anywhere that's got a bit of grass. Okay. So we press H, and then we went Orbix details, gas bowl. So there's our gas bowl. Now, when you're placing a palletized object, it will just be the default color of the material itself. It won't palletize each time, so I can copy and paste it as many times as I want. The palletization doesn't occur until you've built your scenes. Okay. So that's it. Any questions, please get in contact with myself or Norfolk, and we'll be happy to answer any questions, and see you in the next tutorial. Thanks for your time.